Golden autumn sunlight filtered through the changing leaves in Maplewood Town Park, casting dappled shadows across the worn wooden bench beneath the ancient oak tree. Agatha Penny Whistle, 78 years old with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, adjusted her reading glasses and turned another page of The Guide to Extraterrestrial Evolution. The afternoon was peaceful, the kind of tranquility that comes with the changing seasons when children return to school and the park becomes the domain of the elderly and young mothers with strollers. Agatha ran her weathered finger along the complex diagrams, her lips moving silently as she absorbed information most would consider beyond their comprehension. A former librarian with an insatiable curiosity for scientific oddities, she had inherited her late husband Herbert's extensive collection of rare academic texts. This particular volume had been his favorite, though he'd never explained why, merely saying with a mysterious smile that some books contained more between their lines than on them. Beside her on the bench lay her magnifying glass and a small notebook filled with her precise handwriting, observations and questions jotted down in blue ink. The autumn breeze rustled the pages, but Agatha was too engrossed to notice, her attention captured by a peculiar passage about theoretical interdimensional resonance patterns. The first indication that something extraordinary was happening came not as a grand spectacle, but as a tiny, almost imperceptible shimmer in the air. Agatha might have dismissed it as a trick of the light had it not been followed by a sound, something between a chirp and a purr, coming from the oak tree above her. She looked up, squinting against the sunlight, and her breath caught in her throat. Perched on the lowest branch, regarding her with intelligent eyes that sparkled like gemstones, was a creature no larger than a squirrel but unmistakably draconic in form. Its scales shimmered with an emerald iridescence, tiny wings folded against its sinuous body. Before Agatha could process this impossible sight, 4 more diminutive dragons appeared, each a different jewel-toned hue: amethyst, sapphire, russet, and turquoise. They arranged themselves on the branch in a neat row, their gaze fixed intently on her book. "I must be hallucinating," Agatha whispered, removing her glasses to clean them thoroughly before replacing them on her nose. But the dragons remained, and what happened next eliminated any possibility of hallucination. The emerald dragon, clearly the leader, unfurled its wings and glided down to land on the edge of her book. With delicate precision, it released a tiny jet of flame, no larger than a birthday candle's, which licked harmlessly at the corner of page 394. The paper didn't burn but began to glow faintly, revealing previously invisible text beneath Agatha's astonished gaze. "Good heavens," she breathed, instinctively reaching for her magnifying glass. The dragon skittered back, watching her expectantly. It wasn't fear in its eyes, but anticipation. Agatha's scientific mind rapidly cycled through explanations: a prank, senility, or perhaps something in her morning tea, but none satisfied the evidence before her. These creatures wanted something, and it appeared to involve her reading the newly revealed text. With trembling hands, she adjusted her glasses and peered at the glowing script. The words were in an ancient language she recognized from Herbert's studies, a form of Proto-Latin mixed with symbols that resembled mathematical equations. Years of assisting her husband's research had given her just enough knowledge to attempt a translation. A plea from the guardians of dimensional boundaries, she read hesitantly. Seekers of balance require the voice of one who bridges worlds. The dragons chittered excitedly, the amethyst one performing a small aerial somersault that would have been comical in any other circumstance. The emerald dragon pointed its snout insistently at the continuation of the text, its meaning clear. "Keep reading," Agatha continued, her voice growing stronger as the translation came more naturally. "The gateway threatens to destabilize. The connection must be severed before convergence reaches critical mass. Bearer of this text, you are called to complete what was begun." The words resonated with something deep in her memory, Herbert's final project before his unexpected passing 3 years ago. He had mentioned a collaboration with the Coleridge Laboratory, something about quantum resonance and theoretical dimensional interfaces. She had assumed it was merely academic research, but Herbert had been uncharacteristically secretive about the details. The emerald dragon chirped and gestured with its wings, clearly urging her to follow. The other dragons took flight, circling above her head in a formation that pointed toward the park exit. "You want me to go with you?" Agatha asked, feeling slightly ridiculous for speaking to the creatures as if they could understand. Yet from their responsive movements, they evidently did. After a moment's hesitation, what did a 78-year-old woman with arthritis and a prescription for blood pressure medication have to do with dimensional gateways? Agatha carefully placed her book in her large handbag, along with her notebook and magnifying glass. The emerald dragon immediately dove into the bag, settling atop the book as if claiming a perch of honor. "I suppose this means we're going somewhere," Agatha murmured, standing with the help of her walking stick. The remaining dragons formed an escort around her, guiding her toward the street that led to her Victorian apartment building. To Agatha's relief, they didn't attract attention. Either the dragons were invisible to others, or the few people they passed were too absorbed in their phones and daily concerns to notice tiny flying reptiles accompanying an elderly lady home. Once inside her apartment, the dragon's behavior shifted from merely guiding to actively searching. They dispersed throughout her cluttered living space, inspecting bookshelves, examining photographs, and chirping to one another in what seemed like meaningful communication. The sapphire dragon suddenly emitted an excited trill from Herbert's study, prompting the others to converge there. Agatha followed, her curiosity overcoming her lingering disbelief. The dragon hovered before a painting, a landscape of the Scottish Highlands that Herbert had always been oddly fond of despite its mediocre artistic merit. "What about it?" Agatha asked, approaching the painting. The dragon responded by breathing a small flame at the bottom right corner of the frame, where the artist's signature should be. Instead of a name, Agatha now saw a tiny symbol identical to one from the hidden text in her book. Her hands shook slightly as she removed the painting from the wall, revealing a small wall safe she had forgotten existed. Herbert had installed it years ago, but to her knowledge, it had never contained anything of value. "I don't know the combination," she told the dragons, who responded with impatient chirps. The emerald dragon flew from her bag and pointed repeatedly at the book. Understanding dawned as Agatha flipped to page 394. Again, the hidden text contained a sequence of numbers that had seemed random, perhaps a dimensional coordinate. On impulse, she tried them on the safe dial. 17 and 42, 33, 8. The lock clicked open. Inside lay a single item, a small device resembling a compass, but with multiple dials and a central crystal that pulsed with a faint blue light. Attached was a note in Herbert's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Agatha, if you're reading this, then they have found you. I hoped it wouldn't be necessary, but the Guardians wouldn't seek you out unless the situation had become critical. The Coleridge experiment has gone too far. What we opened must be closed. You'll know what to do when the time comes. Your brilliant mind was always your greatest gift. Trust it, and trust them. All my love, Herbert." Tears pricked at Agatha's eyes. 3 years since his passing, and still, he found ways to surprise her. The emerald dragon nudged her hand gently, an unexpectedly comforting gesture. "He knew about you," she whispered. "All this time, he knew." The compass-like device suddenly activated fully, its crystal glowing brighter as the needle spun and settled, pointing northeast, directly toward the Coleridge Laboratory complex on the outskirts of town. The hidden text in the book began to glow in response, revealing a detailed map that hadn't been visible before, showing the laboratory's layout with certain sections highlighted. Agatha studied the map carefully, her librarian's mind cataloging details efficiently despite her emotional turmoil. The highlighted path led to a sublevel marked Project Threshold, presumably where this dimensional gateway was located. "I don't suppose we can simply call the authorities?" she asked the dragons, who responded with what could only be described as draconic expressions of derision. "No, I thought not. Interdimensional gateways probably fall outside local police jurisdiction." She checked her watch, nearly 4 o'clock. The complex would still be fully staffed, making infiltration challenging. But according to Herbert's note and the dragon's urgency, waiting wasn't an option. I'll need a better reason to be there than dragons told me to shut down your secret dimensional portal. Agatha mused. Her eyes fell on Herbert's old ID badge, preserved in a drawer of memorabilia. It was years out of date, but it might get her past the initial security checkpoint, especially if the dragons could provide some form of distraction. The turquoise dragon chirped and pointed toward Agatha's closet, where she kept her rarely used formal attire. The message became clear when it then indicated Herbert's lab coat hanging on a hook. Disguise myself as a visiting scientist? Agatha nodded appreciatively. Clever, though I'm rather older than most active researchers. She changed into a conservative blouse and skirt, donning Herbert's lab coat, which was too large but lent authenticity. The dragons concealed themselves, 2 in her handbag with the book, 2 in the deep pockets of the lab coat, and the emerald one nestling into the silver bun of her hair like an unusual ornament. The bus ride to Coalbridge was uneventful, though Agatha received curious glances from other passengers. She projected an air of academic dignity, chin lifted and eyes focused on middle distance as if contemplating complex equations rather than trying to quell her nerves. Coalbridge Laboratory Complex loomed ahead, a sprawling collection of modern buildings with the sleek, impersonal architecture typical of high-security research facilities. Agatha approached the visitor's entrance, Herbert's compass growing warm in her pocket as if responding to proximity. At the security desk, she presented Herbert's old ID and a story about returning personal items that had been sent to her after his death. The young guard seemed bored and distracted, more interested in his phone than in thoroughly vetting an elderly visitor. Dr. Pennywhistle worked in Building C, right? He asked, barely glancing at the outdated ID. Building E, actually, Agatha corrected, remembering the map. The Specialized Physics Division. The guard nodded, issuing a visitor's pass without further questions. You'll need an escort in the restricted areas, ma'am. My colleague Dr. Blackwood is expecting me, Agatha improvised, recalling a name from Herbert's journals. I know the way. Before the guard could verify this claim, the russet dragon emerged just enough from her pocket to release a tiny spark that caused the guard's computer to flicker. In the moment of distraction, Agatha was through the gate, walking with purpose toward Building E. The complex was labyrinthine, but the compass guided her, growing warmer when she moved in the correct direction. The map in the book had shown the service corridors and maintenance access points that allowed her to avoid main thoroughfares where her presence might be questioned. As she navigated deeper into the facility, the ambient sounds changed, a subtle vibration underfoot, a faint hum that seemed to resonate in her bones rather than her ears. The dragons grew increasingly agitated, the emerald one chittering instructions to its companions who darted ahead to scout. They reached a service elevator marked Authorized Personnel Only. The sapphire dragon manipulated the control panel with surprising dexterity, bypassing the security lockout. As the elevator descended to the sublevel, Agatha felt pressure in her ears and a strange sensation like static electricity raising the hair on her arms. Whatever's down here, she murmured. It's affecting the local energy field. The doors opened to reveal a dimly lit corridor with warning signs posted at regular intervals. Caution, quantum instability, and dimensional research authorized access only. At the end of the corridor stood a reinforced door with a biometric security panel. The dragons immediately set to work, the amethyst and turquoise ones manipulating the electronic components, while the russet one applied carefully controlled heat to specific circuits. Agatha watched in amazement as these seemingly magical creatures demonstrated advanced technological understanding. You're not just magical beings, are you? She whispered. You're something far more complex. The emerald dragon, still perched in her hair, made a sound that might have been agreement. The security panel beeped, flashed green, and the heavy door slid open. Beyond lay a vast chamber dominated by a circular platform surrounded by massive equipment. Above the platform, suspended in midair, was what could only be described as a tear in reality. A fluctuating oval of energy that pulsed with unnatural blue-violet light. Scientists and technicians worked at control stations around the perimeter, their faces illuminated by monitor glow. Agatha ducked behind equipment, observing. The tier was clearly unstable, occasionally expanding with a sound like thunder before contracting again. Each fluctuation caused instruments to spike and technicians to shout adjustments. A woman in a lab coat with a security badge identifying her as Dr. Evelyn Blackwood, project director, was moving urgently between stations, her expression grave. "The containment field is failing," she announced. "Dimensional bleed is increasing. We need to stabilize the gateway or shut it down." "The military liaison insists we maintain the connection," argued a technician. "They're still retrieving data from the other side." "At what cost?" Dr. Blackwood snapped. "Herbert warned us this could happen. The dimensional barrier wasn't meant to be breached this way." At the mention of Herbert's name, Agatha felt a pang of grief mixed with pride. He had tried to prevent this, it seemed. The Emerald Dragon nudged her urgently, indicating the book. Agatha opened it to find the hidden text now fully visible and reorganized into what appeared to be shutdown procedures, complex equations and sequences that corresponded to controls she could see around the chamber. She needed to reach those controls without being detected. The dragon seemed to understand the challenge, exchanging chirps before launching into action. The russet and sapphire dragons flew toward the far side of the chamber, where they began creating small, controlled chaos, shorting out minor systems, triggering alarms on non-critical equipment, and generally drawing attention and personnel away from the main control panel. Taking advantage of the distraction, Agatha moved along the perimeter, Herbert's lab coat and her age making her surprisingly invisible in the crisis atmosphere. Most young researchers had been trained to overlook cleaning staff and elderly colleagues, a social blindness she now exploited. She reached the main control panel just as Dr. Blackwood was called away to deal with the mysterious malfunctions. The book's instructions were clear, but execution would require speed and precision. The amethyst and turquoise dragons positioned themselves to assist, their tiny claws manipulating switches too small for Agatha's arthritic fingers. As she initiated the shutdown sequence, entering the first set of stabilization codes, a voice behind her made her heart nearly stop. "You're not authorized to be here," said Dr. Blackwood, her expression transitioning from anger to confusion. "Wait, I know you. You're Herbert's wife." Agatha straightened, abandoning pretense. "Yes, and I'm completing what he started. This gateway is causing dimensional instability. It needs to be closed." "How could you possibly know that?" Dr. Blackwood demanded, then gasped as she noticed the dragons. "They're real?" "Herbert always said, but we thought it was theoretical." "Evidently not," Agatha replied. "And they've shown me what needs to be done." She held up the book with its glowing text. "Herbert left this for me." Dr. Blackwood's expression reflected internal conflict, scientific ambition warring with ethical responsibility. "The military wants to weaponize the gateway. They're extracting technology from the other side. I've been trying to slow them down, but..." An alarm blared, cutting her off. The dimensional tear expanded dramatically, energy crackling outward. Equipment exploded in showers of sparks as technicians scrambled for cover. "It's collapsing," Dr. Blackwood shouted. "The containment field can't hold." Agatha thrust the book toward her. "Help me complete the shutdown sequence. Herbert trusted you once. Prove he was right." After a moment's hesitation, Dr. Blackwood nodded. Together, they began implementing the complex procedure, their actions guided by the dragons who moved with increasing urgency. The Emerald Dragon stationed itself atop the main control panel, directing its companions to critical systems around the chamber. Security personnel began pouring in, responding to the multiple alarms. The russet and sapphire dragons created a perimeter of minor fires and electrical failures, delaying them while Agatha and Dr. Blackwood worked. The final step required simultaneous adjustments to multiple systems, impossible for just two humans to accomplish. Without prompting, the dragons positioned themselves at key points, waiting for Agatha's signal. Herbert's final notes. Agatha explained rapidly to Dr. Blackwood. "Mentioned a stabilization chant. I need to read it while the systems are recalibrated." She began reciting the ancient words from the book, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. As she spoke, The dragons acted in concert, manipulating controls with precision timing. The tear in reality began to pulse in rhythm with her words, the violent fluctuations gradually synchronizing into a stable pattern. The emerald dragon's eyes locked with Agatha's, communicating an unspoken instruction. Understanding intuitively. She placed her hand on the central crystal of Herbert's compass device, which now glowed with blinding intensity. The final phrase of the chant felt like it pulled energy from her very core, channeling it through the compass toward the dimensional tear. The gateway began to contract, energy spiraling inward rather than expanding outward. The violent blue-violet light shifted through the spectrum to a calm amber before collapsing to a single point and winking out of existence. For a moment, absolute silence filled the chamber. Then reality reasserted itself with the wail of alarms, shouts of confusion, and the heavy footsteps of security personnel breaking through the dragon's diversions. "We need to leave," Dr. Blackwood said urgently. "They'll detain us for questioning if we're caught. The emergency exit is this way." They slipped out through a maintenance corridor as evacuation procedures were initiated throughout the complex. The dragons rejoined Agatha, the emerald one chirping what sounded remarkably like congratulations. Outside, evening had fallen. They made their way to the perimeter fence where Dr. Blackwood used her access card to open a service gate. "What happens now?" Agatha asked once they were safely beyond the complex grounds. "The official story will be a failed experiment. Nothing interdimensional, just conventional physics gone wrong." Dr. Blackwood replied, "I'll make sure Herbert's role in developing safeguards is properly documented." She glanced at the dragons with lingering wonder. "And these beings?" "I believe they have further plans," Agatha said, noting the emerald dragon's insistent tugging toward the direction of the park. Dr. Blackwood smiled sadly. "Herbert always said you were the extraordinary one. He was just fortunate enough to recognize it. I should have listened to him sooner." She handed Agatha a business card. "If you ever want to discuss quantum physics over tea, I'd be honored." They parted ways, Dr. Blackwood returning to manage the aftermath at Coalbridge while Agatha followed the dragon's guidance back to Maplewood Park, now empty in the twilight hours. The ancient oak trees seemed to glow with subtle luminescence as they approached. The emerald dragon directed Agatha to sit on her usual bench and opened the book once more. New hidden text had appeared, elegant script that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The coronation ritual. Agatha read aloud, translating the ancient language. "For she who bridges worlds and maintains balance, the title of Queen Ambassador is bestowed." The dragons arranged themselves in a ceremonial formation before her, each bowing in a manner that, despite their diminutive size, conveyed profound respect. As Agatha continued reading the ritual words, she felt a strange warmth spreading through her body, as if dormant energy was awakening within her cellular structure. "I don't understand," she said, pausing in her reading. "Why me? Surely there are younger, more qualified individuals." The emerald dragon chirped insistently, pointing first to her, then to Herbert's photograph visible in her open handbag, then to a specific passage in the book. Agatha adjusted her glasses and read, "The bloodline of guardians continues unbroken through bonds of heart and mind. Knowledge shared becomes lineage earned." Understanding dawned. Herbert wasn't just studying theoretical physics, he was part of this guardian lineage. "And when we married, when we shared knowledge..." Her voice trailed off as the implications became clear. Through their decades of intellectual partnership, she had unknowingly been initiated into this ancient responsibility. With renewed purpose, Agatha completed the ritual reading. The dragons responded by rising into the air, circling above her head in a coordinated flight pattern that created the illusion of a small crown of living flame hovering above her silver hair. A tingling sensation passed through her body, subtle yet profound. When it subsided, Agatha felt different, not younger precisely, but more vital, as if dormant aspects of her being had been activated. "The Queen Ambassador shall serve as intermediary between realms." She read from the final passage. "Guardian of boundaries yet builder of bridges. Knowledge shall be her shield, wisdom her crown, compassion her strength. The emerald dragon settled gently onto her shoulder, its warm presence comforting against the evening chill. The others arranged themselves around her, no longer hidden but proudly visible. "I suspect," Agatha said dryly, "that my retirement has just become considerably more interesting." The dragon chirped what sounded remarkably like laughter. As darkness fell completely over Maplewood Park, an elderly woman walked slowly homeward, her silver hair catching the moonlight. To most observers, she appeared to be nothing more than a solitary figure with a walking stick and an overlarge handbag. But those with eyes to see would notice the tiny winged figures accompanying her, guardians of a queen who had found her unexpected kingdom in the twilight of life, her reign just beginning. In her apartment that night, Agatha began organizing Herbert's books with new purpose. Guided by her draconic companions, the Emerald Dragon, whom she now knew was called Emerald in a literal translation of its true name, indicated certain volumes for immediate study. The knowledge they contained would prepare her for the diplomatic responsibilities to come. As she worked into the early hours, Agatha felt none of the fatigue that usually plagued her aging body. Instead, she experienced a clarity of mind and purpose that had been missing since Herbert's passing. The coronation ritual had changed something fundamental within her, awakening dormant potential. "Is this how Herbert felt?" she asked Emerald, who chirped an affirmative. "All those years, keeping such secrets, I thought I knew everything about him." The dragon's expression somehow conveyed that there would be time for such reflections later. For now, there was work to be done. Other dimensional gates existed, other boundaries required monitoring, and somewhere beyond human perception, dragon elders awaited formal introduction to their new ambassador. Agatha Penny Whistle, 78 years old, former librarian and newly crowned Queen Ambassador to Draconic Realms, picked up her pen and began taking notes. The universe, it seemed, was far more extraordinary than even the scientific literature suggested, and her most remarkable chapter was just beginning. Outside her window, stars twinkled in the autumn sky, some perhaps not stars at all, but distant gateways to realms awaiting discovery. Agatha smiled, thinking how delighted Herbert would be to know that their shared passion for knowledge had led to this improbable coronation. The emerald dragon perched on her lampshade, its jewel-like eyes gleaming with approval as its new queen prepared for adventures that defied conventional understanding of age, reality, and possibility. And somewhere between dimensions, balance was restored, at least for now.